The world is currently staring down the barrel of a gun, and it feels like we're just one wrong move away from a total regional blowout. From the scorched deserts of the Middle East to the high-stakes briefing rooms in Washington, D.C., a single question is on everyone's mind. Are the U.S. and Iran on a direct collision course? Over the last 12 hours, the news breaking out of the Beltway has sent shockwaves through global markets and left defense hawks on edge. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the layers of this escalation that the mainstream talking heads aren't telling you. According to a deep dive report from the Wall Street Journal, the Pentagon has ramped up its footprint in the Middle East to levels we haven't seen in years. This isn't just a show of force anymore. Military analysts are calling it an aggressive strategic pivot. The New York Times recently blew the whistle on the fact that the Biden administration has quietly greenlit additional air assets to be deployed in hot zones where Iranian-backed groups are calling the shots. The events unfolding over the last few hours suggest that the Red Sea is no longer just a trade route, it's a shooting gallery. The presence of U.S. carrier strike groups sends a loud and clear message. Washington is done playing wait and see and has moved into action mode. Defense insiders at CNN suggest that the endgame for the U.S. isn't necessarily a head-on war with Tehran, but rather a calculated effort to clip the wings of Iran's proxy network to maintain the American grip on the region. The most chilling part of this military buildup is the economic fallout. The second a report of a strike hits the wire in D.C., the price of crude oil jumps 2 to 3%. Bloomberg economists warn that if the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important oil choke point, is even slightly compromised, we're looking at a spike in gas prices that will hit every American right in the wallet. This is exactly why oil supply chain and U.S.-Iran conflict probability are red-hot search terms right now. No matter how far you are from the front lines, you're going to feel the heat at the pump, because this energy crisis is a kitchen table issue for everyone. But in the midst of all this saber-rattling, a new voice is rising from within the states. Digital creators and independent investigative bloggers are holding the government's feet to the fire. There is a massive debate raging on X and YouTube about why billions of taxpayer dollars are being funneled into overseas conflicts, while Americans are struggling with a high cost of living at home. Many creators are calling the Biden administration's foreign policy a double standard, preaching human rights on one hand, while fanning the flames of war with the other. The protests hitting the streets of D.C. are a clear sign of a public that is fed up with being the world's policeman. The million-dollar question remains: will Iran take this lying down, or are they planning a massive counterpunch? That's the cliffhanger that leads us straight into our next segment, where we dive into the global economic meltdown that is a direct byproduct of these commander-in-chief decisions. If you feel like your paycheck is vanishing faster than a New York minute, you aren't alone. We're currently caught in the middle of a perfect storm where geopolitical chess moves are colliding head-on with your bank account. This isn't just some unfortunate trend. It's a calculated economic squeeze centered right on the world's energy jugular. Today, we're following the money trail to see why the global economy is currently skating on thin ice. According to a heavy-hitting report from the Wall Street Journal, the escalating tension in the Middle East has thrown the global supply chain into a tailspin, with the Red Sea essentially becoming a no-go zone for many major shippers. Massive cargo vessels are being forced to take the long way around Africa. The result: the Financial Times reports that international shipping costs have skyrocketed by over 300% in just a matter of months. And make no mistake, that extra cost isn't being absorbed by the big guys. It's being passed straight down to you at the checkout counter. Oil isn't just fuel. It's the lifeblood of the modern world. Analysts over at Bloomberg are sounding the alarm, stating that if we see a direct gloves-off confrontation between major regional powers, crude oil could easily blast past the $100 a barrel mark. In that scenario, we're not just talking about a few extra cents at the pump. We're talking about a massive inflationary ripple effect that hits everything from your groceries to your Amazon deliveries. It's no wonder oil price forecast is currently a breakout search term. People are bracing for impact. But here is where the plot thickens. In the digital trenches, American creators and economic watchdogs are calling foul. There is a growing sentiment across social media that the administration is playing a dangerous game of robbing Peter to pay Paul. The critique is simple. Why is Washington focused on stabilizing foreign borders when the American dream is becoming unaffordable for the average family? Independent investigators are pointing out that while billions are being invested in military hardware, the domestic infrastructure and the kitchen table economy are being left in the rearview mirror. The Economist recently ran a piece suggesting that this isn't just an economic crisis, it's a credibility crisis. If the powers that be can't get a handle on the cost of living monster, the political fallout will be historic. This economic pressure cooker is fueling a fire of discontent that is spreading from Middle America to the heart of D.C. But this economic crunch isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the direct result of a foreign policy strategy that many are now calling dangerously out of touch. Is Washington losing its grip on reality, or is there a method to the madness? That brings us to our next segment, the brutal critique of the U.S. foreign policy playbook.
America is back. That was the big campaign promise that echoed through the halls of power when the current administration took the keys to the White House. But as we look at the global map today, a lot of folks are asking, back to what exactly? From the heart of the Beltway to the living rooms of Middle America, there is a growing sense that the U.S. foreign policy playbook is stuck in the 1990s, while the rest of the world has moved on. Today, we're diving into why Washington's policeman of the world routine is facing its biggest backlash yet. A recent deep dive by the New York Times highlights a massive rift growing right inside the president's own party. It turns out the blank check policy for overseas conflicts is becoming a hard pill to swallow for many on Capitol Hill. The Washington Post recently ran an op-ed suggesting that this administration is suffering from a strategic blind spot, prioritizing foreign entanglements over a coherent domestic security strategy. The last 12 hours have seen a surge in Beltway insiders leaking concerns that the U.S. is overextending its reach while its influence at home continues to slip. But the real heat isn't coming from the ivory towers, it's coming from the digital front lines. Independent creators and citizen journalists are lighting up X and YouTube, pointing out the glaring double standards in how Washington picks and chooses its battles. The narrative is shifting from defending democracy to defending interests, and the American public is starting to see through the smoke and mirrors. Creators are showing their audiences the math, billions in advanced weaponry being shipped out, while American schools, roads, and healthcare systems are left to wither on the vine. It's a guns versus butter debate that is reaching a boiling point. Even the heavy hitters in the foreign policy world are starting to blink. Foreign Policy magazine recently noted that Washington's aggressive stance has inadvertently pushed old rivals like Russia and China into a marriage of convenience. By trying to be everywhere at once, the U.S. is finding itself stretched thin, losing its soft power in the process. The search trends don't lie. U.S. hegemony and de-dollarization are no longer just fringe topics. They are mainstream concerns for anyone watching the global balance of power. The critique isn't just about the money. It's about the moral high ground that seems to be shifting beneath our feet. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the devastating images coming out of the Middle East, where the line between strategic partner and complicit bystander is becoming dangerously blurred. That gut-wrenching reality leads us directly into our next segment, the humanitarian crisis in Israel and Palestine and the diplomatic firestorm it has ignited.
The last 12 hours in Washington, D.C. have been a total pressure cooker. While the talking heads on cable news try to keep it polished, the reality behind the scenes at the State Department is a lot more chaotic. We're at a point where diplomatic doublespeak is clashing with a brutal humanitarian reality on the ground, and the fallout is landing right on the doorstep of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The Washington Post just dropped a bombshell report revealing a massive internal revolt within the administration. Apparently, career diplomats are sounding the alarm that the U.S. is losing its moral standing on the world stage faster than a sinking stone. Over the last few hours, reports from Politico suggest that the ironclad support for current operations is facing its toughest test yet as the body count continues to climb. This isn't just a foreign policy headache anymore. It's a full-blown political crisis that's shaking the very foundations of the D.C. establishment. But the real story is playing out in the streets and on our screens. Independent creators aren't waiting for the evening news to tell them what to think. They're using raw, unfiltered footage to show the boots-on-the-ground truth that often gets sanitized by the big networks. On X and TikTok, the narrative has shifted from strategic military goals to the sheer human cost of the conflict. The search trends for Gaza ceasefire and U.S. military aid transparency are through the roof because the public is tired of being kept in the dark about where their tax dollars are going and what they are funding. Even the mainstream heavyweights like CNN are being forced to acknowledge the shifting tides. There is a growing consensus among geopolitical analysts that the U.S. is walking a tightrope with no safety net. The critique from the digital trenches is relentless. Many are asking why Washington is preaching restraint while simultaneously replenishing the very stockpiles that keep the conflict burning. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, and for the first time in a long time, the American public is demanding a seat at the table. This moral and legal tug-of-war isn't just happening in the Middle East, it's happening in our own courtrooms right here in D.C. While the world watches the explosions abroad, a different kind of explosion is happening in the legal world, an ethics scandal involving a high-ranking official that has legal eagles across the country on high alert. That brings us to our next segment, the high-profile legal battle that's turning the D.C. bar upside down.
While the world's eyes are glued to the maps of the Middle East, a different kind of war is being waged in the mahogany-lined courtrooms of Washington, D.C. This isn't a war fought with missiles, but with motions and mandates. We're talking about a high-profile legal ethics case that has the potential to pull the rug out from under the D.C. establishment. This is the story of when the system decides to turn on its own. The Washington Post recently broke a story that has sent a chill through the halls of the Justice Department. The D.C. Bar's disciplinary board has officially leveled professional misconduct charges against a former high-ranking government official. This isn't some minor clerical error. We're talking about allegations of intentionally misleading the court to push a political agenda. As the New York Times put it, this case isn't just about one lawyer. It's a litmus test for whether the American legal system can still police its own elite. The last 12 hours have been a whirlwind of activity. Politico is reporting that a fresh batch of smoking gun emails has just been entered into the record, showing a level of coordination behind the scenes that most people only see in Hollywood thrillers. The search trends for D.C. Bar disciplinary proceedings are spiking because everyday Americans are starting to realize that the rule of law might be more flexible than they were taught in civics class. The independent creator community is already all over this, breaking down the legalese and showing how these behind-closed-doors deals actually affect your rights. But here is where it gets real. The legal eagles on YouTube and X are pointing out a massive double standard. They're asking the tough questions. Why does a government official get years of due process and hearings for a blatant lie, while a regular citizen would be behind bars in a heartbeat? This case is fueling the drain the swamp narrative more than anything we've seen in the last decade. It's exposing the revolving door between big law firms and high-level government positions, and the American public is officially over it. Even the mainstream outlets like Reuters are being forced to cover the growing public outcry for ethics reform. There is a sense that if this official walks away with a slap on the wrist,
the credibility of the entire D.C. legal system might just go up in smoke. It's a high-stakes game of legal chicken, and the next few days will determine who blinks first. But while the legal battles heat up inside the courtrooms, the actual temperature outside is hitting a breaking point. Washington, D.C. is currently facing a literal trial by fire as nature prepares to deliver a record-breaking blow. That takes us to our next segment, the heat dome that's putting the East Coast on life support.
Just when you thought the political heat in Washington couldn't get any higher, Mother Nature decided to up the ante. We are currently witnessing a weather event for the history books. A massive, stubborn heat dome has parked itself right over the East Coast, turning the nation's capital into a literal furnace. This isn't just your typical hot summer day. This is a record-shattering climate anomaly that is pushing the city's infrastructure to the absolute brink. USA Today just issued a red alert report stating that the National Weather Service has placed the D.C. metro area under an excessive heat warning, with temperatures hitting levels we haven't seen in decades. The Washington Post's Capitol Weather Gang is sounding the alarm, reporting that the heat index, what it actually feels like when you step outside, is surging past the 110-degree mark. Over the last 12 hours, we've seen reports of power grids under massive strain as millions of air conditioners work overtime to keep the beltway from melting down. But this isn't just about the numbers on the thermometer. It's about a city that wasn't built for this kind of extreme. Independent creators on the ground are documenting the heat island effect, showing how the massive concrete monuments and asphalt streets of D.C. are trapping the heat and refusing to let go even after the sun goes down. The search trends for D.C. power outage map and extreme heat safety are exploding as residents scramble to stay cool. People are asking the big question, is this the new normal for the East Coast? The digital community is also pointing out a glaring infrastructure gap. While the fancy offices on K Street are kept at a crisp 68 degrees, the working-class neighborhoods and the city's homeless population are being left out in the cold, or in this case, the extreme heat. Critics on social media are holding the city's feet to the fire, asking why the world's most powerful city is struggling to keep the lights on and the water flowing during a predictable weather event. It's a third-world problem in a first-world capital, and the frustration is palpable. Even the New York Times is weighing in, suggesting that this isn't just a weather story, it's a national security story. If our capital can't handle a heat wave, how can it handle a major crisis? But as the sun beats down on the D.C. pavement, the government is busy trying to cool things down in a different way, by pouring billions into a new industrial revolution designed to fix the economy from the inside out. That leads us to our next segment, the White House's high-stakes gamble on American manufacturing.
While the headlines are dominated by the thunder of war, a different kind of explosion is happening in the American industrial landscape. We are witnessing a massive, high-stakes pivot that is redrawing the map of the global economy. From the steel mills of the Midwest to the cutting-edge AI hubs in the South, Washington is doubling down on a Made in America agenda that is as aggressive as it is controversial. Today, we're peeling back the layers on the industrial boom that's being sold as a national savior, but is leaving many Americans wondering if they're about to get left behind. The White House just put out a massive fact sheet highlighting what they call a landmark industrial boom in Louisiana, a $100 billion surge in private sector investment. According to official reports, we're seeing a land rush for AI data centers, steel production, and shipbuilding. But as the Wall Street Journal points out, this isn't just about building factories, it's about a total decoupling from foreign rivals. The recent signing of the Ratepayer Protection Pledge by tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft is a sign that the government is playing hardball, forcing big tech to build their own power resources for data centers, so the average American isn't stuck with a surging electric bill. But let's get real.
This industrial renaissance comes with a massive price tag. The Guardian recently highlighted a wave of anxiety sweeping through the corporate world as a new 15% across-the-board tariff begins to bite. While the administration calls these tariffs a leveling of the playing field, economists warn they could act as a hidden tax on the American consumer. We're already seeing the fallout. Over the last 12 hours, reports have surfaced of major companies like Ford paying billions in extra costs for raw materials. The independent creator community on X is lighting up, asking the tough question, is this a manufacturing boom or an inflation bomb? The search trends are telling the real story. Inflation data March 2026 and industrial job stability are currently red-hot terms as the public braces for the latest CPI report. People are seeing the industrial boom headlines, but they're also seeing their Social Security COL updates barely keeping pace with the cost of bread and eggs. Independent watchdogs are pointing out a glaring disconnect. The government is celebrating record investments, but factory employment in some sectors is actually dipping as automation takes over. It's a brave new world for the American worker, and the anxiety is palpable from the Rust Belt to the Gulf Coast. Even Bloomberg is sounding the alarm on a financial cash crisis hitting tech giants as they dump billions into AI infrastructure. This high-wire act of reshoring America's industrial base is the ultimate gamble. If it works, we're looking at a new American century. If it fails, we're looking at a stagflation nightmare that could haunt the country for a generation. But while the gears of industry grind on, there's a quieter, more personal side to the American story being told in the heart of D.C., a story of the heroes who shaped the country we're trying to rebuild. That leads us to our final segment, a look at the hidden heroes being honored at the Library of Congress.
While the sirens of geopolitical conflict and the hum of industrial machinery dominate the airwaves, there is a quieter, more profound story unfolding in the hallowed halls of the Library of Congress. Beyond the gridlock of Capitol Hill and the frantic pace of the Beltway, Washington, D.C. is currently playing host to a cultural revelation. This isn't just about dusty archives or old books. It's an investigative journey into the hidden architecture of the American identity, the stories of the women and visionaries who literally built the social fabric we are trying to repair today. The Smithsonian recently unveiled a groundbreaking retrospective that has historians and the public alike doing a double-take. We're talking about the recovery of lost narratives from the early 20th century, specifically the trailblazing women who navigated a man's world to influence everything from constitutional law to urban planning. The New York Times art critics are calling it the most essential exhibit of the decade, noting that these archives prove that the American spirit has always been forged in the fires of adversity. Over the last 12 hours, a surge of young Americans has been hitting the National Mall, proving that even in a digital-first world, there is a deep, gut-level hunger for authentic history. But in true DC fashion, even history is a battlefield. Independent cultural critics and creators on X are pointing out a digital divide in how we preserve our heritage. While the elite institutions house these treasures, a massive debate is raging about digital accessibility. Why is so much of our shared history still locked behind physical walls? The search trends for American Women's History Archives and national heritage preservation are spiking as people look for a sense of anchor in these turbulent times. It turns out, when the future feels uncertain, the first thing people do is reach for the receipts of the past. The critique from the digital trenches is fascinating. Creators are using these exhibits to draw parallels between the suffragette struggles of the past and the economic struggles of today. They're asking, if our ancestors could rebuild the country after a Great Depression and 2 world wars, what's stopping us now? This cultural moment is acting as a moral compass for a nation that feels like it's lost its way. Even the Washington Post noted that this isn't just a walk down memory lane. It's a call to action for a new generation of leaders to step up and own their place in the American story. As we close this investigative series, it's clear that Washington, D.C. is a city of layers. From the high-stakes military gambles in the Middle East to the record-breaking heat on the streets, and from the legal scandals in the bar to the industrial boom in the heartland,
The story of United States Digital is the story of a nation in transition. We are a country of contradictions, constantly tearing ourselves down only to build ourselves back up again. The question isn't whether we will survive these interesting times, but what kind of America we will choose to be